Hey everyone, and welcome back to Gender Decoded, the podcast where we break down the big social patterns, the silent assumptions, and the hidden codes behind how gender works in everyday life. I'm really glad you're here today. Whether you're tuning in from your couch, your commute, or maybe swiping on a dating app while listening, we've got something fascinating to unpack. So settle in, grab a drink, and let's dive deep. Today's episode is all about online dating, but not the tips and tricks stuff you see everywhere. We're going under the hood. We're talking about the actual data, what people do, not just what they say. Specifically, we're exploring who messages whom on dating apps and how behavior differs between men and women. We'll be looking at a data set that compares how users rate each other's attractiveness and who they actually choose to message. And trust me, what the numbers show is wildly different from what people think they're doing. We'll look at patterns of desire, strategy, risk, and rejection. Why do women rate nearly all men as below average, but then message men they don't rate that harshly? What does all this say about modern romance, competition, and how people navigate attraction in a sea of endless options?
Welcome to Gender Decoded, when numbers align, seeing the stories that data defines. Breaking the barriers, truth untold, insights in gender, the data falls.
All right, let's take a step back. This story starts with OkCupid, one of the earliest major dating platforms that didn't just build algorithms but also publicly analyzed its own user data. Back in 2009 and 2010, OkCupid engineers conducted a large internal study where they looked at two key actions from users. First, the ratings people could rate other users on a scale from 0 to 5 based purely on looks. Second, first messages who actually reached out and started a conversation. They didn't just stop at averages. They matched ratings to behavior. For example, if you rated someone a 3 out of 5, did you message them? Or did you skip over them for someone you rated higher or even lower? The dataset was enormous, covering hundreds of thousands of interactions. And while the specific platform design may have changed since then, similar behavioral studies from more recent years show the same exact curves. So we're not just talking about some one-time fluke. These are durable patterns that have lasted through Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, and beyond. Let's talk about what they found. First up, men rating women. When men rated women's attractiveness, the curve looked pretty balanced. Like a bell. Most women were rated somewhere in the middle, around 2.5 out of 5, with smaller numbers rated at the extremes. That suggests a kind of moderation. Most women, in the eyes of male raters, are seen as okay, not amazing, not awful. But then came the twist. When you look at who men actually messaged, the curve didn't just shift, it warped. Suddenly, most of the messages went to the top third of women, and a huge percentage were directed at the highest attractiveness category, the 4s and 5s. To put numbers to it, about 2/3 of male messages were sent to just 1/3 of women. And the top slice? That elite group of women received 25 times the number of messages that the lowest rated women received, 25. In other words, men say most women are attractive enough to rate 3 or above. But when it comes to actually reaching out, they ignore everyone except the top tier. It's a classic case of overreaching. Or maybe it's just efficient strategy in a saturated market, who knows? But either way, it's a huge mismatch between stated preference and actual action. Now, flip the roles. Women rating men? That curve was nothing like the men's. It was brutal. Around 80% of men were rated below the midpoint. Most men, in women's eyes, were not average, they were worse than average. That's a statistical oddity, right? You can't have 80% below average. But here, it's not about math. It's about how harshly women were judging profiles. The ratings were incredibly skewed left. But here's where things get interesting. When women sent messages, and they do initiate messages, though less frequently the curve smooths out, women tended to message men who were attractive, sure, but not the very top. They didn't chase the 5s as aggressively as men chased the most attractive women. Instead, women sent most of their messages to guys who were somewhere around the 60th to 75th percentile in attractiveness above average, but not extreme. This group actually received the most female attention, even though they didn't score highest in ratings. So women rate men harshly, but when they actually reach out, they don't chase unicorns. They go for someone realistically attractive. That's a more calibrated kind of behavior, still selective, but not fantasy-driven. Now let's pause and reflect. Why is this happening? Well, there are several layers to this. One has to do with numbers. On most dating platforms, men outnumber women. So the marketplace is tilted from the start. Men are in oversupply. Women are in high demand. That alone causes competition to spike, especially for the most visually appealing women. Second, there's cost. Sending a message costs almost nothing for a man emotionally or socially. Worst case, no reply. But for women, sending a message can bring a flood of attention they didn't want, or just increase emotional labor. So women pre-filter harder, they give low ratings, but then reach out only to the few profiles they feel comfortable with. Third, there's evolutionary psychology. It's not everyone's favorite explanation, but it's worth noting. There's long-standing research suggesting that men are more visually driven in attraction, while women tend to factor in more contextual cues: status, confidence, personality. That might explain why women's messaging curve is smoother and less skewed by pure looks. Also, let's talk about feedback loops. If men see that top-rated women get fewer replies because they're overwhelmed, they may send even more messages to try their luck. It's like trying harder to win a lottery. And then you have the reply rate paradox. The people who get the most messages are actually the least likely to reply because their inbox is a jungle. So in a weird twist, messaging someone slightly less elite may give you a better chance at a real conversation. Here's another mind-blowing stat. Men tend to message about 17 percentile points up from their own rated attractiveness. Women? They reach out about 10 percentile points up. That difference may sound small, but it adds up over time, especially when everyone is chasing the same small pool of top-tier profiles. So what does all this mean? If you're a man, you might want to rethink your approach. Instead of firing off messages to only the top 10% of women, try looking at the people you rated a 3 or 4 people who are already above average in your own eyes. Statistically, they're more likely to reply, and the conversation might be more balanced. If you're a woman, consider initiating. Studies show that when women send the first message, not only do they get a higher response rate, they also end up matching with more desirable partners overall. It's one of the few strategic moves that has consistent upside with no real downside. And if you're just someone trying to make sense of dating apps and why they feel so overwhelming, it's not just you. The system is skewed. It's competitive. It's shaped by numbers, algorithms, expectations, and yes, some ancient mating scripts we still haven't outgrown. But awareness helps. Knowing how these patterns work can make you more intentional. It can make you kinder to yourself when things don't click. And it might just help you stop chasing the people everyone else is chasing and start noticing the ones you might have overlooked. So to wrap up today, we talked about real data from OkCupid and how it reveals deep gendered patterns in online dating behavior. We saw how men tend to message way above their rating curve, how women rate men harshly but message more realistically, and how these patterns create a feedback loop of hyper competition, missed signals, and inbox overload. But we also saw that a little strategy shift messaging closer to your range, or taking the initiative, can go a long way in cutting through the noise. That's it for today's episode of Gender Decoded. I hope you found this as fascinating as I did. If you did, share it with a friend, or bring it up next time your group chat is complaining about Hinge. I'll be back soon with another episode, digging into how gender shows up in the most unexpected places. Until then, take care, be kind, and decode wisely.